excited to, oh, wait, hold on, Houston. Meeting is now, oh no, we are now. Okay, good, just making sure. Today we're going to talk about relationship killers. We are joined by Dan Alexa. I'm going to turn it over to Jerome. Before I do though, I want to tell everybody to make sure you comment, like, share, all that good stuff while we are doing this today. And we are excited to hear from you. And Jerome, it's all you.
I just need to know really quick, why'd you say my name after you said relationship killer?
We'll figure that out. It's because of what you did to my relationship, Dan.
Oh, hello, everybody, and welcome to another Tuesday Live here with CLCI. This month, we will be focusing on relationships. Last month, we went all over goal setting, and if you guys want to check that out, go ahead and check out our previous 4 videos for the entire month of January. We're in February now. It is the month of love. Valentine's is coming up, right?
It's Mardi Gras too.
Mardi Gras is coming up, which I'm excited about. Not so much Valentine's, but you know what? It's okay, to each their own. We do have a special guest with us here today, facilitator Dan, and I'll give him a minute so he can go ahead and introduce himself. Also Lisa, who is somewhat of an expert in this field, as she is a relationship coach. She's shaking her head, she's being modest, but I'll go ahead and give both you guys a second to introduce yourselves, starting with Lisa.
Oh, I thought we were starting with Dan. Okay, welcome everyone. We're going to talk about my favorite thing, relationships. Been working on relationships as a couples coach since 2011. I've learned a lot from my own personal world, let alone working with clients. When I work with clients, or when I started working with clients, at first I didn't want to get in front of people arguing. Who wants to do that? But in the light of who I became as a couples coach, it was the perfect thing for me to do. So we'll talk about some of those aspects. Dan's incredible through his coaching experience. He's worked with couples here and there as well. So let's share. Dan, you're on.
And I'm an expert in relationships because I've had so many. So yeah, there's that too. And it's all about bringing it all together to get that golden heart that's beating so nice like that and making everybody happy and communicate. Yes, there we go. Awesome.
No hearts on my end.
Because the 2 biggest things in coaching tend to be either work or relationships. So let's dial in on that relationship thing.
Yeah. And even with relationships in work, it's still the same. It's all about a relationship, whether something's working or not working, you're not speaking up, you're speaking up too loudly, etc. But I am stepping on your toes, Dan. Please tell us more about you.
As you were saying that, the first thing that came to mind was the only difference between the two is the size of the severance package at the end. That's how it all comes together for me, in wonderful humor and just creating. What is it about creating relationships? So my background, hypnotherapist, PCC level coach with the ICF, and 3-time #1 Amazon bestseller. So working with clients on all those fronts, but really the relationship stuff is the fun stuff, because it's not the external relationship at the end of it all. We'll go further into that later.
Is it my turn now? Do I get to? Hi, everybody. And I'm Brooke. I'm the Chief Marketing and Operating Officer here at CLCI. And I am a woman of many relationships. Some long, some short. So, but that being said, relationships can be defined as many things, and it's not just, you know, the lover relationship that we're speaking of. There's business relationships, there's coach client relationships, there's a ton of different kind of relationships we can talk about. Real quick though, what do you guys think is like the #1 killer in any kind of relationship? I mean, across the board. I have my thoughts on it.
Is it cheating if I know the answer?
Well, I mean, I'm talking about all kinds, but I mean, in it, every
relationship. Any relationship,
yeah.
Okay.
But I think it's a violation of trust is really a big. I mean, that for me would be a huge killer. You know.
Personally, again, personally, I think communication would be
Mhm.
one of the largest killers. Lack of it, I should say.
Mhm.
It's usually not a lack of, they're usually communicating, but they're not communicating in a way that is beneficial to whoever you're in a relationship with.
And that's what the next week we're going to do, speaking the same language, and the following week we're going to do fair fighting techniques, both Lisa concepts. So which is exciting, because then we're going to get into that. We're going to talk about those things and how to do them, I guess, more successfully or fairly or what have you. So communication, trust.
And I lean toward low individual self-esteem.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
think that's a big portion of what interferes with.
Mhm. That creates it creates the fertile ground for all the other stuff.
For the other things to grow from. Yeah.
Yep.
Or die from, I guess. In
Mhm.
particular
And
case.
it truly is fertilizer. So there we have that too.
Yeah.
Real quick, I want to say hi to Carolyn Vargas and hi Anna Cordova. Hi guys, thank you for watching. She says trust and a lack of communication and respect. Respect. Well, respect. When it comes to respect, that's big across the board. What creates respect? I mean, is that something you pluck from the thin air? Is it something you just give to people? Is it? I mean,
I think there's different ways to earn respect and build respect. Some people will automatically come in and already have that respect, just like trust. They'll already have the trust. They'll already have the respect until you start the opposing person, right? Sharing with other things.
Carolyn Vargas says pride. Pride is often, and I think pride and that self-esteem thing kind of are connected, aren't they? They're similar. I guess a symptom. One's a symptom of another, I would think.
Yeah, it becomes what is the energy of pride at that point? Is it egotistical pride that puts me above someone, or is it proud of myself where I'm energized with confidence, which is an entirely different energetic, rather than needing to be prideful, boastful in that sense of the word, which shuts down communication.
Anthony Lopez says the relationship evolving or the people changing, and it ends. Maybe they just, this is something similar to what my dad has said. You either change together or you change apart. And then Carolyn says, ego, everyone's greatest obstacle. So very much all of these are, I think now we have some statistics though of the relationship killers.
Before you go there, let me share. So I'm a big Gottman fan, as some of you may know, and I've got the 4 horsemen of apocalypse that he utilizes as a title to make it more easily understood. So he's got the, if you will, the negative side, and then he's got the antidote to that. So I won't talk about the antidote right now. I'm just going to talk about the 4 apocalypse, which is criticism. It's a character attack. Right? What's a character attack? You're pointing the finger at them and telling them they've done bad in some fashion, right? That their character is not good. The contempt, that's where we're talking about the no respect, the lack of or disrespect. And we've got the defensive mechanism that I'm going to defend myself. And then usually what I do if I'm defending myself is then point the finger at you and blame you for something that you were asking me about. And then stonewalling, where I'm just going to shut down, I'm going to check out, I'm not going to be here to participate. So those, and with Gottman, he has simplified it to give us those titles to kind of relate, and then we'll talk later about the antidote. Okay.
My question for you though, in that those to me feel like, again, like symptoms of, you know what I mean? They're like, they are sort of ways that we express ourselves when something deeper is going on. And so it's, for me, it would be figuring out what that something deeper is, which comes down to the communication, the respect, the ego, the pride, right? At the end of the day.
Not working past the frustration.
Because that's in those, when we're being contemptful or critical, that's usually that's sort of a way of fighting, I guess. You know what I mean?
You have to recognize what you're doing first.
Yeah.
Right? You have to understand what you're doing so that in this place, if you don't already, work backwards, and it comes down to like what we were talking a couple weeks ago about what is the why, and getting down to what's underneath all of that.
Any other thoughts with that? Dan, do you have any?
Yeah, I think it underlies right into what is the purpose, and also a little bit of what we talk about in level 2, that difference between attachment and connection. Am I attached to the idea of it being one person, or the relationship being a certain way, and this story and what I'm supposed to get out of it and how it fulfills me but it's this external rather than the connection to the energetic of what is the ideal, who may be the ideal, and coming from a place of a full cup rather than doing the hold on, it'll be there in a second. The Oliver Twist walking around with a bowl saying, "Please, sir, may I have some more? Please."
So that's my question is, when you say ideal, and we use words like ideal, we're all human, right? So is there such a thing? Because at the end of the day, we can have a concept of ideal, but really we're going to have to deal with the whole person at some point, and that means traits that are less than ideal, right?
Why I don't use the word perfect. Because
well,
ideal. Yep, go ahead.
Well, and we have to have if you will, I don't mean literally, although it could, a contract with each other so that we can work through the ways that we need to work through things and set things up. If I go through this, I may need a moment to recapture who I am in a more stable. I don't want to say stable. That's not the right word. Calm, maybe calm. If I'm upset, trying to set a boundary when I'm upset is not really going to be beneficial, because I'm still going to point the finger. I'm upset. So it's finding that space in between that allows me to do the work.
And I think that going right in along with that I particularly don't use the word or perfect around that, because ideal implies a lot of different things. It doesn't just mean I'm seeing the world and experiencing it through rose-colored glasses and everything is perfect. Ideal also opens the possibility for me to be challenged, to grow, because that other person is a reflection of what's going on with me and the story I'm telling about it. And that might be my time to confront my crap and grow and let the relationship connect and bloom from there.
Well, and not to be spooky woo-woo, but there are these concepts of soulmates or twin flames. But when you really read about what that is, it's probably one of the most challenging relationships, because they exist to make you grow, and we grow out of we don't grow when everything's fantastic and wonderful and puppies and kittens.
Yeah.
We grow when things are tough.
When I hear people say that, it kind of makes me crazy at the same time, because it's my soulmate. It's like, do you know what you just said? Go ahead, Dan.
and that's exactly it. It's like, because I play in that space in the other half of my practice sometimes, and not to make it spooky woo-woo, but if we're playing with this idea of soulmate, that could mean they're there to help you grow and be difficult. It's not about, but unfortunately most of the narrative around this idea of soulmate and twin flame is, we're going to be so happy together and it's wonderful. When that ain't it.
Total fairy tale. And that's where all of this gets lost. People expect in a relationship to be living the fairy tale, and it's not supposed to be this much work. We're not supposed to have this kind of conversation. That's what I've heard time and time again. It should not. I should not need to say this. I should not have to clarify. I should not have to tell them. So there's so much I should not have to's. And those are the killers. We're going back to the title. If you are so stuck on your story, attached to the story of what your old set of patterns and beliefs are, what we have to be in order to get to the other side is open and flexible and open to the possibilities of something other.
Well, and that's attachment. Again, not being attached to, and I think it's also trusting the process and the person. But I think a big part of it too is coming back together, like where you may have those moments, but you have to make that commitment to, okay, I'm going to go back and actually have a reasonable conversation with this person and not just give up on it, and that's the stonewalling, right? Where you, but being able to come back together even after those moments when they were tough and have a reasonable conversation is huge.
And I think it also comes back to trusting self to be able to have that conversation and come out the other side of it.
Mm-hmm.
Because we can show up in our most authentic place and being ready, no control over the other person and how they respond, react, or anything else to it. It comes back here ultimately. And maybe the fact that we had that, it's really easy in the attachment phase to have that conversation and have it go wrong and blame ourselves. Well, I shouldn't have done that. I should have kept my mouth. No, you should have had that conversation because it got you free of the stuff you were in. Own that.
Well, I will say too, honesty is something that's very important to me. And so I ask, please be honest, even if it's painful or critical, but I had the tough lesson of learning. You have to also receive, you have to be equally as graceful, receiving the honesty as it's as important as giving the honesty, and how you receive it. It plays a big part in
That is true, but it's also delivery. So there's some people that will say, I'm not going to sugarcoat anything. It's like, it's not about sugarcoating. There are vocabulary words that work better for someone else to be able to hear than other vocabulary words that are harsh and critical.
Mm-hmm.
Starting off with, I love you. Let's talk about our relationship. Where do we want to see it grow from here? You pissed me off. No, right? Totally a different thing than that softer, as John Gottman calls it, softer startup.
Well, and that's like the I statements and the, but that can be tough in those moments when you've got your
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. Carolyn Vargas says, what about comparing, whether it's comparing with other people, comparison with other relationships? So taking and comparing it with others and saying, it's one of the things that I think it can be very damaging about Facebook and social media is people are only showing you a very narrow view. And if you compare yourself to that, it's completely unfair to everybody involved. Right?
And your past relationships, that's baggage.
Oh yeah, when somebody going on a date with somebody and all they do is talk about their ex, or
you're in a relationship and there's things about a past relationship that you want either didn't like or did like. It doesn't matter which side of the fence, but then you're comparing it to the relationship that you're in. Absolutely. That's baggage. It doesn't matter good or bad. It's still baggage. You have to, in the moment, that's the mindfulness presence of what works for me today. What do I need to build from here? How do I express myself to my partner so that they are hearing me and not feeling lambasted is the only word I can think of.
So one of the things we talked about last week with Joe, when Joe was here, was that about how the older we get, the more timid we get, the more rigid we get, the more sort of afraid, because we've tripped and we've fallen, we've realized it hurts. And so we try to avoid that again. So in a relationship, with that, and you've been hurt, how do you move through it with that sort of freedom of allowing everybody to just be and not being scared and not being, I mean, it sounds fantastic, but it seems like it might be harder than you say it, but than just saying it, I guess you could say. So thoughts?
It's a tough space, having been there many, many times in my 20s. And I think the big shift after my first marriage ended in divorce, which I asked for, and both of us were ready to tap out, but neither of us was owning it. There came a moment where I was working with my counselor on it. Yes, counselor. That I needed to protect my space. because it was draining me, everything that was going on, but the relationship was the heart of the drain. And understanding that I had to put myself first to take care of it and move through it. And yes, there was another person involved with it, my then wife, not another person, but my then wife was involved. And that was a hard thing to work through, because the story was, my story was, if I do this, I'm going to hurt someone else, and blah, 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 blah. And that was the thing I had to move through and really own and navigate it on the backside. That we both came out of it. Yeah, there were a lot of scary moments. There were a lot of harsh emotional moments. Years later, now I see I can handle it better, that her stuff isn't my stuff, or no longer is. But in that moment of someone else pointing the finger saying, you did this to me, you did this to me, you did this to me, it's hard not to, particularly from somebody who has a high level of empathy. It's really hard not to take that on and own it as, oh my God, I practically killed someone. I killed the relationship, but it truly needed to die for us both to be happy. And a silence fills the room.
I was just.
We're all thinking about what you just said.
You want honesty, you're getting it from me.
Yeah, where I'm going to go with is, that's when I work with couples, I don't try to keep them together for that reason. It's what's best going to work for the couple. That's not how most people do it. Their goal is to keep the couple together. So when I work, I would have been very supportive of that exchange, of you guys coming to that realization, and what is the next game plan from there, essentially.
Yeah. And that was where this counselor was with it. And I really feel like as I look back on that relationship, he was really more of a coach to me, because he let me come to my conclusion and then really helped me find the space in myself to stand up and make the declaration I needed to make in it.
That's one of, I mean, that is always difficult. That is so, I mean, in marriage and everything, it's never an easy conversation to have at all. And one that we would happily avoid, but you reach a point, which brings me to a thought or question, something we talk about in level 1. It's mentioned at some point, and that is that relationships are the catalyst for change, typically. Can you guys talk about that a little bit?
If there's no relationship, if there's just a sole person, what's the reason to do anything differently? And that could be shifting to an external, and the relationship between a single other person in romantic relationship, or in community relationship to others. And I keep coming back to the inside. There's also the relationship with myself. And if I'm beating myself up and I start to notice it and don't want to feel that way anymore, the catalyst for change is the change I want to have in my own inner self-talk as well.
I love that you brought that up, because that was one big relationship that we really haven't mentioned, and we probably don't think about very often. And that is our own relationship with ourselves. Because we all have to live with ourselves every day, right?
A lot of the people we are in a relationship with, whoever we're in a work, home, friends, they are a mirror to who we are. And it is also a great opportunity, if we can and want to grow a relationship, to find out how we own who we are and what we need to go through to maintain it. Yeah.
A question.
Yeah.
So we're speaking about your relationship from within with yourself, and then also exterior relationships as well. Anybody, do you believe that there is a level of importance that you should put above either of those? Or go ahead, and what I'm trying to ask is, do you believe that is it more important to take care of your relationship with yourself or exterior ones, or is there no level of importance? It's kind of just something that should happen all at once. Just curious.
Who wants to go first?
Well, I'm wrestling you. You ready?
Let's go.
Go ahead, Dean.
Relationship with self takes precedence over everything and has to be reinforced, has to be protected, has to be nurtured.
It's the foundation of any relationship.
Because what happens when you lose yourself? I mean, you lose identity, you lose everything, right?
Relationships fail.
And that's what happens. And when I both friends a long time ago, and then occasionally when I get into relationship work with a client, that the ones who are who feel a void in themselves, and it's like, oh, this person out here completes me, and you hear that languaging a lot. No, they might fit that space in some way, but that once they go away, then the void is back and it feels bigger because the puzzle piece got ripped out most times. You have to come from that full cup. And well, there we go.
That's one of the things I like is Jerome and I have had this exact conversation kind of where you can't begin to fill another person's cup if yours is empty or void, or there's nothing to spill over and give when you are vacant. That being said, though, that isn't to say that you have to be 100% perfect, the best person you're always going to be.
Where I want to go is you can be in a relationship and be working on building who you are and working on the relationship. It takes a lot of strength and perseverance and openness to go down that path and not getting into shame or blame the other person.
I will argue that we're always a work in progress, right? We are always a work in progress. So we'll always be working on ourselves, even in our relationship. So knowing that, what is the indicator that you are ready for a relationship? I mean, I have thoughts, but
I think for each person, it's going to be different, honestly.
Exactly.
I don't know.
Yeah,
that's the indicator. That's a rough one. That's a tough
one, right? It's like, when is it? I'm ready now. And I guess it's just sort of an internal thing, but we would all probably have our own definition of that. But I would
go ahead.
When I'm in a place that I feel like I could be unselfish or think about somebody else, like where I'm in a thriving place, not a surviving place, I guess you could say.
There's plenty of people that strike up relationships in a surviving place. There's plenty of people that they go through what is it, I got a blank, the addiction center, where they go through and they come out in a relationship, but it's not based on what they live out in the world. So
chances are that it's not gonna survive, right? But that's at the same time, though, being somebody that's been in relationships that haven't, sometimes that's okay, though, because you grow and it's what you needed at the time. But now that has changed. Yeah. And so we don't have to beat ourselves up over a relationship not working. It's just that you are in a different place in your life, right?
And that's not what normal, I'm going to say normal, that is not the right word, but most people, they don't come out of a relationship like that because they have been taught mostly that you've got to fight and knock down, drag out. They haven't come to the idea mostly that we can have a conversation about not working out and be really sad about this not working out and really wish that it would have worked out. What can we learn from it so that we don't bring it into the next? That's in a mature adult relationship, when you can bring that. What did I learn and what do I need to do differently?
Anthony says, sometimes you will never be ready or know that you're ready. You can always find new things to work on, improve on, but at the end of the day, it could be just taking a leap of faith.
Yeah. I mean, how else? We've already described, how else have we seen a lot of the times that we need our own self-growth is by in that mirror of our person that we're trying to have a relationship with.
And I think
oh, go ahead.
I think that brings it back around to what Lisa was saying earlier, that space of the reflection, recognizing the reflection, and having a level of emotional intelligence not to be attached to that cultural or family storyline of you've got to fight for it, you've got to beat up, because that's attachment as well. And being in a space of being kind to ourselves and recognizing the learning, moving into that presence of what did I learn from it and how do I move it forward, so we're not in the all the time of us or the other person.
Mhm. A question I had read, it's similar to what Jerome asked. We have many relationships, right? We have business relationships, we have personal relationships, we have friends, lovers, all these things. Is there any time, or how do you prioritize? Sometimes they don't jive with one another, right? And sometimes can be a relationship killer. Well, you're not giving me enough attention, you're giving this too much attention, you're giving this relationship, and then jealousy happens or resentment. And so what is there a way to mitigate that kind of reaction, or is there a way to strike a balance? Any thoughts on that?
Like you said earlier, it's a symptom.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
To get underneath, and I hate to use that word why, but why is that affecting you? What about that? What does it remind you of? And what do you want to do about it today? And oftentimes, without asking you right now, Brooke, give me an example, but just kind of out there, oftentimes it has to do with the love and self-love and our ability to recognize it. And when it's not in front of us, can we recognize it? And a lot of people have a hard time recognizing when it's not right in front of them. You'll hear people talk about even just a friendship that they haven't spoken with in a while, and they're able to pick up like it was yesterday that they spoke. And that's because it didn't need to be right there in front of them. That love was supportive and respectful, all of those kinds of things. How do we bring that into our daily life and blossom it from there?
So my question is, what is it about those relationships where you don't have to nurture it? It just is, right? It's one of those things where you just know it exists, and it is, and that person is there.
Those are the relationships that are like a ficus.
Yeah,
you just put a little bit of water on them every now and then, it just continues to thrive and be fine.
So what is unique about those relationships? Like what is it that makes those relationships different from the others?
I think every time I've had that type of connection, the underlying respect of each other's boundaries is there. The understanding that we both have lives, and maybe it's been 10, 15, 20 years that we haven't connected. You know what? The phone rings both ways. I'm responsible too. And the also genuine interest in being involved. It's like time has passed, but let's make this connection happen. And it's awesome to see you again.
So important. That I think that is so critical. That I'm interested in your life, but I also understand that you have one. And I respect that. But that I think you really hit the nail on the head with the boundaries. It's a respect thing, and it's also an interest. Yeah.
What's coming to mind here is 2 years ago when I taught in Dallas, my closest friend that I've known since kindergarten, we graduated together, and shortly after graduation, we lost touch. I lost track of him. No contact for 25 plus years. And out of the blue, we connected a few months before I went to teach in Dallas. He lives outside of Dallas. We went out to dinner that night, and it was like just catch up, and everything was great. And note that 25 years didn't even exist.
I'll also say lack of expectation, kind of. It's an understanding, not an expectation, I guess you could say. You understand that person is there, and that you guys will get together, it'll be fantastic, but you don't have parameters with which that will happen, right?
And there's, as you're sharing that, what comes up to me is there's an interesting dynamic in those relationships. There's what I mentioned before, like the genuine interest. There's no shaming energy around, like, where have you been for 25 years? Why didn't you try and reach out and find me?
That guilt.
Like the guilt that comes from that lesser than, I want to make you feel bad because I haven't seen you for 25 years versus, oh, where did that time go? Let's hang out.
So I'm going to ask this question. Where does guilt come from? That's a deep, that's a...
From wanting to... the administering of it or the feeling of it?
Well, if somebody is I mean, because it's both. I mean, there is something. It takes two to make guilt happen, right?
I think
Because if I don't feel guilty and you're trying, and I have no reason to feel, I'm not gonna. So I'm like, go ahead, have fun. Like, you have to be open to receiving the guilt in order for it to affect you, right? So it's an interesting dynamic, guilt.
I think a lot of
And I think it's one of those words that we attribute to all bad, and I don't think it's all bad.
Mhm.
I think it serves a purpose when it serves a purpose. You know, I know the three of us are in a class, and we're talking about the victim and sage and all this good stuff. And when it's used in the way that's not meant to be harmful,
Mhm.
self or otherwise, guilt has an education possibility, whereas the criticism of guilt can take us down a different spiral. Or somebody was going to say something I heard.
Is there another way? Because I don't know. Yeah, you're right. Guilt has such baggage. It does. It's like that first date with the, talking about all the exes and saying they were all horrible. Right there, there's a lot of baggage, and guilt has the same thing. It has a lot of baggage for me, because it always, again, is something that I don't know, that just can do a lot of bad things. So is there another thing you can call guilt, that lesson that, like, okay, I don't like the way this feels. I don't want to do that again. Because I mean, the guilt doesn't have to come from someone else. We can self-relationship ourselves
Sure.
guilty into things.
Growth is a good word. If we're into self-growth,
It's one of those lessons. It's identifying that moment that, okay, I didn't like the way this made me feel. We don't even have to apply guilt to it. It's just acknowledging something that didn't resonate with you, and then ideally learning and changing.
There's a level of, like, the word that keeps coming up is grace and acceptance around that.
I love that. Yeah.
Gracefully saying, I felt that way then, and what did I learn from it? And yeah, I feel sad about it, but I will do my best not to repeat it, either the situation or the activity again.
And that's a forgiveness, acceptance.
Yeah, because it's a learning.
It's learning. And it's learning. And again, it's another way relationships help us learn and change.
Unless we take on what we've coined as the resentment flu, is that we don't voice it. We continually hold on to things.
I've never heard that before, the resentment flu.
I resent this and I don't really voice it, or I have voiced it and you haven't, again, pointing the finger, you haven't accommodated my request. And then we go down that path again, and we go down that path again, and that resentment keeps building. And a lot of the times that is a killer of a relationship.
Devil's advocate, do you have to voice your resentments? Like, is that a necessity? Do you have to okay, I have to tell you this, otherwise I'm never getting past it. That has to happen.
That's the red flag that people talk about. Oh, I wish I would have paid attention to those red flags. Well, you did pay attention to the red flags. What you didn't do was talk about the red flags and find out what works and what doesn't work in a relationship.
Yeah,
I'd love that.
I think of, like, I'm seeing, like, Dr. Resentment Popper right now. It's like there's this image from Dr. Pimple Popper of this thing that just festers and festers and festers. And if you don't cut it out, it's just going to get worse. It just continues to grow.
And that has to involve the other person to cut it out, is my question. Because I mean, I feel like there are things I could go and work on and then be like, okay, that was about me. I can go into, because there's some situations where you may not get to talk to that person, or you may, but you can get through the resentment on your own as well on some level, right?
Ideally, if it's with someone else, it's helpful to talk with them, talk it through with them. But absolutely, you can do it on your own as well.
Well, I'm thinking about other relationships. Like if I have a boss that is, and I really can't air my grievances with this boss. I have to find a way to get through that outside of telling him he's an asshole.
What's another way you might say?
Which I don't have a male boss, so
it's one of those things where There again, coming back to this idea of connection, not attachment. Even if we do get the opportunity to say that thing to that person, we can't be attached to they're going to receive it. It's about
Understand
the
it,
getting
or
it
give
out.
you give you a response that you find satisfactory, all these things. Because if you've played it out in your head 100 times, chances are it's not going to go the way you think it is.
No, but it does come back to your delivery method also. Is you can be conscientious on how you're stating things and be as mindful, intentionally using those words to be as mindful as possible with what message you want to send.
That is, I'm just thinking out loud as you're sharing. So in business, for me, I'm very, very easy for me in business. Keep a level head, take a moment, think about it, breathe it through, give it 24 hours. But sometimes in personal, not as easy. But why wouldn't I take the same tools I use in my business and apply them to personal, so that I take that 24 hours, take a breather, I know better to do it here. Why do I have no restraint here? And that's, again, that's just, me selling myself short, because I do. And I'm, but again, relationships across all bounds and tools applicable across all bounds as well.
And it's funny that when I've had conversations, maybe not with clients, but similar conversations in that space with people, the story of the difference of these two compartments that come up, that I can do it at work, but can't do it here. That what tends to come up here is the underlying thing is, I'll die alone. And that has come up in a number of conversations with friends. I'm not talking.
The cynic in me goes, well, you're going to die alone anyways. I mean, everybody dies alone. Unless you're in like a mass, but it's still kind of a solo process. If we're going to get dark.
Yeah, there's this fear of being alone that creeps forward, that I can always find another job, but for some reason, there's an attachment that this person is the one.
And that's so funny, right? That we get, why is that we are so open to switching jobs or switching, trading things in and out like hairstyles. But then when it comes to this one thing, we get so attached.
See, I don't necessarily agree that we don't trade in relationships, because, when I was in Orange County area and I read the statistic of divorce rates.
Oh yeah, we were just
it's unbelievable the lack of commitment people have, because it gets hard. And so because it gets hard, the expectation of the fairy tale seems to take over.
You and I had this conversation not too long ago. I said, what is the most important thing in a relationship? And I thought it was trust, but you nailed it on the head. You said commitment. It's having that commitment to one another. Without it, who cares? Love isn't even more important than commitment.
Well, it's committed to having the hard conversation of, again, the red flags, of the attachments, of the being able to talk about them and not blowing up through them. Finding the space, like you were talking about, one has at work, is so much easier at work, when we're not as attached to the people like we are to our mates.
Mm-hmm.
And the attachment that we have in our mates, we've invested a lot of something in them.
Mm-hmm.
And somewhere along the line, we want to be right.
And I wonder if also in there between the two, because I'm hearing it, I'm hearing where you're coming from with that on that investment difference between the two, that over here in work, there's some level of detachment because I'm invested in a role.
Yeah.
But in relationship, I'm invested in my identity.
Well, not only that, but in work, it's a very clear understanding of what we are working towards. It's a financial goal. It's a goal of success. But we know what that is, right? In personal, can be a lot more vague, right? You don't necessarily know that you guys you're working towards love. Okay, then that's what I mean. But is that defined as much as I know if I have to close a deal? I know if I have to keep business flowing. I know it's very clear process. Whereas this side doesn't necessarily have that level of clarity,
which
because it's emotional.
You know, to bring up a good point. We've also been trained in our work stuff or go through training. And in relationship,
There's not training.
typically
Mhm.
don't. Although for me and my husband, we broke up before we got married, and then we went to counseling. We decided to get back together, and counseling allowed for a different way to speak to one another and have that support system to help us muddle through how we were saying something and what we really meant by what we were saying. So it's getting underneath and getting to the emotional, like you were speaking about, because we are family. When we're in that family position, love does have a big part, but at the same time, the struggle's real. It's how we deal with it.
Well, and one of the amazing things that you said when we had that conversation about the commitment being the most important thing, and was that, well, if you, and I was like, but what about love? What about, and you're like, well, if you can find love again, but not if you aren't committed to coming back together to work on that and figure that out. And I think in business too, a lot of times we're bound by contracts and things of that nature. And so we have to be committed to figuring it out. And I guess that's where that marriage, that kind of commitment plays a big role, right? It's the attempt to do something similar as well. But we can always pull the parachute.
There is a time that my husband and I, when we were married, that either one of us was going to pull the parachute, but we did have the ability to keep turning towards each other, as Gottman calls it, that turn towards, and keep working at that detail that we needed to work at. Some of it is still the same 30 some odd years later. We've been together for 38 years, married 33. Some of it's never changed. And then other phases of it has completely changed. So it's trusting. And I trusted him, especially today, that he's got my back. And I think he trusts me today. And I don't have to think. He trusts me today that I have his back, even though we still struggle.
Mm-hmm.
We have personalities.
Yeah, we're people.
Egos.
Again, yes. And that's always going to be great. I mean, sometimes we're not perfect. We're not meant to be.
I'm perfect. He's not. I'm just kidding.
Lisa, you mentioned you guys speaking about having each other's backs. Maybe we have more time for this because I think this is big next week. Vulnerability in relationships. I think.
Oh my gosh, it's very important.
And well, that's the building of trust. And that was one of the things that, I mean, we only have about 10 minutes left, but I wanted to touch on is that building of trust. And I wanted to also talk about that with our clients as coaches as well, and generating that, maintaining it, and how to do so. But that might be an entire other topic for an entirely different day. So so in that case, we have 10 minutes left. Final thoughts, anything we want to wrap up or touch on, or questions, anybody out there as well. But Anna Cordova says, in a relationship, you need to create time for each other, but it is also essential and healthy to have time for yourself and to work on your own personal growth.
There's a lot of different things that'll help with that. Yeah, it's the small things in most relationships that matter most. A lot of the times, people will do in relationships big gestures and think they're going to get lots of points for that. And really, the partner generally says it's just the small things that really mean a lot to me. So
yeah, it's the little things, and it's just that consistency, right? I think that consistency is so critical.
Yeah.
In a relationship is
consideration, thoughtfulness, and thoughtfulness not meaning I'm getting you a gift. Thoughtfulness meaning I'm thinking about you throughout the day and I let you know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You are a human being that pops in my head, and I express that. Yes. Which
that's one of the things my wife and I do, is not so much now, unfortunately, because we don't travel as much, but each of us, we tended to travel opposite. So there were times we wouldn't see each other for 10 or 12 days, and we would slip cards into each other's suitcases before we left, or if we missed the slipping it in, we put it on the bedside table for when they got home, and just that constant reminder that we're there for each other.
Mm-hmm. I love it. I got the warm and fuzzies.
That's the current wife, not the old wife.
The current, not the old one. Thank you for the clarification.
The one and only.
The one and only. Yes. See, what did I learn from the other one?
Remember vocabulary.
Yes.
Any other final thoughts with regard to how to unkill your relationships?
And we've got next Tuesday coming up. Isn't it before Valentine's?
It is, yes.
Yeah. Mhm.
So I think talking about what builds relationship. I mean, we've touched.
Well, yeah. Next week we're going to talk about speaking the same language. That's why I thought that long language conversation about how and hearing the same language as well.
Gary Chapman's
Mm-hmm.
5 Love Languages, I think, are a great place to start. It is not the end all be all, but I think it's a great place to pay attention to.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where I wanted us to jump off on. And I also wanted to apply it to, so this will be next week, apply it to coaching, business, speaking your client's language, and also helping them to speak language to the people in their life as well. So just sort of that snowball of once I've learned that language is goes beyond just being English or Spanish, there's a whole lot of nuance and a lot to be learned in that area.
I have a short story. Can I give you a short story? I'm running through the airport, going to one of these classes that we so love to teach. I'm running through the airport, trying to get, because I'm in between planes, right? I think I was in Dallas. I'm heading down the run or down the hallway to get to the next plane. And I have these lovely people from Japan stopping me. And it's like, I'm like, why are you stopping me? They didn't speak English. But I read their body language. Oddly enough, I understood what they were asking. I was able to direct them as if I'm the know-all, be-all of all things. So body language has a huge piece in all of this. So pay attention to your body language, and we'll speak more on that.
Yeah, I love it. Jerome, final thoughts?
Relationships are hard, but I think they're important and they're worth fighting for and understanding. So I mean, as humans, I think we all crave relationships. I think that's all at the core of our existence. So being able to figure out exactly how you work as a person and how you are compatible with other people, I think is worth all the time in the world, because at the end of the day, that is one of the most important things in the world is relationships. So
yeah.
Dan, final thoughts?
Love yourself deeply and selfishly in an egoless way.
Mm-hmm. That's it's confidence. Well, it's humbly confident is what it is in finding that what that is. Yeah.
And remember, we're all human trying to be loved.
And my Jerome, with regard to relationships and them being absolutely, I personally learned that you can't do it alone. I tried, and I've learned it's not possible. I definitely need people. So in the same vein of love yourself and everything else, also be compassionate and understanding and willing to hear and forgive when it's right, you know. But I think that you have to give as well. What?
Always forgive, because if you don't forgive,
well, yeah, you've got to forgive. Yeah. It'll eat you alive. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But I mean, I guess when I'm saying when it's time, when it's you're in there's that forgiveness really starts with forgiving yourself and not forgiving somebody else. So, yeah. So thank you guys out there for watching. We will be doing this again next week at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. This is Certified Life Coach Institute. Dan is one of our amazing facilitators. He teaches a lot of our classes, and he's got a beating heart. Thank you for being here, Dan. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I want one.
Thank you.
I'm gonna have to get myself a crystal heart.
We're gonna have to hop on Amazon tonight.
Now I know what I'm getting Jerome and I for Valentine's Day, and that's crystal hearts. So thank you guys out there for watching. Make sure you comment, share, like, check out Certified Life Coach Institute. We certify life coaches in 3 days. All right, thank you, Anthony. He's a great job, everyone.
Thank you.
You're the conductor this time, Brooke.
Have a beautiful evening.
Oh yeah, I have to hit